episode 133 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Sid, we had our highlight of the year. I was going to say our highlight of the year. That was probably the wedding, in retrospect. But our normal highlight of the year, which is the way that we celebrate the end of the season, it is the Cricket Writers Club annual lunch. A lunch that begins at midday and ends at 8 p.m. or so. It's a good occasion. There are photos of me on Twitter holding multiple gin and tonics. And it was a good day. But the key thing that we are going to be talking about in this week's podcast is about the awards. Now, part of the annual lunch is the presentation of annual awards. And this year, there were 3 awards that actually went to women. There are now 2 official women's awards that we'll come to in a minute. But the Peter Smith Award of the Cricket Writers Club, which is their award for outstanding contribution to cricket, this year went to Katherine Brunt for her many years of, service, I guess you would call it, in support of the England women's cricket team's cause, creating havoc for batters around the world. And she is the first woman who's ever won it. So that was exciting, wasn't it, Sid? Yeah,
we've talked before, haven't we, about how hard it is for women to win these kind of mixed awards. So there are a lot of these awards in cricket which obviously basically in the past just by default went to men because, the women weren't involved at a level at which anybody took any notice of. The people that were kind of nominating and awarding these awards. But in the last few years, what a lot of people have done have gone, okay, well, it's always gone to a man, but it's a mixed award, so there's the option for women to win it.
Yeah.
But it's always like, it feels like a woman has to put in like an absolutely exceptional performance in order to win one of these awards. And of course, the men that win them are also putting in exceptional performances, but the women really do have to go 300% over and above in order to have a chance at winning that. But I feel that kind of Katherine Brunt has done that really with, the many years that she's been playing for England, and her commitment throughout that period. Of course, bearing in mind that for, the first 15 years of her career, she barely got paid at all. So she spent a huge chunk of the beginning of her career as an amateur. They didn't have, the kind of the backing of all the medical teams and services that they've got now. So, she had, perhaps it's a little unfair to call it second-rate medical care, but it wasn't the top medical care that they get now, which meant that, she had problems with injuries. It's been really interesting to see the way that players like Katherine have actually had less injuries over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, even though they're coming to a point in their career where you'd expect them to get more, but it's because they're in an environment where those things are being managed much better. Anyway, so I think that it just shows that what an exceptional person she's been, what an exceptional contribution she's made to the wider game, and what an impact she's made. Not just on bowlers' stumps and wickets, but on the people that vote for these awards in particular. The Cricket Writers Club remains dominated by middle-aged white men. Terrible thing, middle-aged white men. Don't get involved with middle-aged white men, Raf. But it's true that it does, and their focus generally is on men's cricket. But in this case, Katherine Brunt are well deserving of her award.
Good. Okay. And then the other 2 awards were the Greater Than Gin. That was the sponsor.
Yeah, you enjoyed some Greater Than Gin, didn't you,
Yeah,
Raf?
and they particularly sponsored the award for Emerging Cricketer of the Year, which is the kind of the women's award for somebody who's up and coming. Last year it was won by Alice Capsey. This year it was won by Freya Kemp, who won't be able to have a Greater Than Gin and tonic to celebrate because she is, of course, still 17 years old. But she's had what a summer she's had, Sid.
Yeah, I mean, when we were watching the first games we watched this season were the first times that we'd seen Freya Kemp. Charlotte Edwards had been banging on about her for years, but we hadn't seen her play before. And then we really saw that game that we saw at Hove. which was the Southern Vipers against the South East Stars, and she came in and smacked like 40 odd runs off 20 balls at the end, and some just exceptional hitting. She just hitting the ball a huge distance. She was hitting it into the middle of the Sharks stand, and that's like unheard of. I've seen Danny White hit centuries at Hove, and she's never done that. And that was the point at which we went, wow, this kid is really good. Obviously, England and Lisa Keightley and Heather Knight were watching on as well, and they took that on board and gave her an opportunity. But I think what's been so important about Freya Kemp is that they have really given her quite a long opportunity as well, which is what's perhaps been a little bit missing from some of the younger players they've introduced in the last few years. Freya Kemp has already, kind of won more caps than someone like Katie George did, because they've given her that consistent opportunity to play in quite a long run of games, including those ODIs at the end. And it took a long time to even get a bat, right? It was like her 9th or 10th innings before she got a proper bat. She had like one innings where she'd batted for like 3 or 4 balls or something in a T20. But then when she finally got that opportunity, which came in like her 10th England cap or something, then she was able to go and hit those 50 runs and really kind of show what a talent she is. So yeah, she's been a really exciting prospect, hasn't she, Raf? What's your take on the kind of Freya Kemp phenomena?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see. I do remember, it feels like she's bookended our season somewhat, because as you say, the first match that we went to in the 2022 season was an inter-squad Vipers match at the Aegeus Bowl, and it was baking heat. It was Good Friday. We only found out about the matches at the last minute, so off we toddled to the Aegeus Bowl in beautiful sunshine, and suddenly we're watching this left armour run in and bowl, and Charlotte Edwards happened to be standing near, and I turned round and I said, "Who's that?" I honestly didn't really know anything about her, and Lottie said, "That's Freya Kemp. She's going to be really good. Watch out for her." And I did, and I think, as not for the first time, Charlotte Edwards proves to be correct in her summations of players. So it's been really nice to see. I think she did take a little bit of a battering during the India ODI series, and that was difficult for her, I think. But I don't think that is necessarily something against her. I think that there was a degree to which during that series there was a bit of an issue going on in terms of there not necessarily being the guidance. There was a little bit of a leadership vacuum going on that we talked about last week in particular, and I think that if you're a young seamer, if you're 17 years old and you're still in your first season as a professional cricketer, then it is going to be quite difficult when you're running into bowl and you're getting boshed around by Smriti Mandana and Harmanpreet Kaur. So, not necessarily any shade on her, but I think she's not the finished article by any means, is she? I think that's what I'm trying to say. She needs very careful guidance and careful mentoring from England, from whoever the next coach is going to be. But it has been an exciting season for her.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see over the longer term whether she kind of makes that sort of grade as a great player. I think that's what the jury's still out on, isn't it? I think that, we all think and, feel kind of instinctively that Alice Capsey has got what it takes. That, obviously it doesn't mean it won't go wrong, but Alice Capsey has got what it takes to be a great player. Whereas Freya Kemp, she's still got a lot to prove. But what a start to her career.
Yeah, absolutely. And the final award at the Cricket Writers Club lunch, or the final women's award, I should say. There were plenty of others, but we're not going to bore you with those. It was the JM Finn Women's Cricket Award, and that went to Nat Sciver, who I believe actually, did she also win the PCA Women's of the Year award? So it's been quite a good week if your name happens to be Nat Sciver. And I'm one of the judges for the Cricket Writers Club Women's Award. I think it's okay to say that. I hope it's okay to say that. So I was one of the people who really thought that she'd earned this award.
So why did you pick her? Why did you and the rest of the committee, of course, not just Raf. There's plenty of people on the committee.
Fortunately, yeah. So if you don't like the decision, then blame somebody else. But no, why did we give it to her? Well, so the important thing about this award is that it's not just the English summer, like the Wisden Cricketers of the Year are, etc., and like some other awards are. It's for the whole of the previous 12 months. So therefore, it encompasses the Ashes and, importantly, from Sciver's perspective, the World Cup as well. So she kind of bookended that 2022 World Cup with 2 centuries, didn't she? One against Australia in the group stages, and then obviously in the final against Australia as well. And both brilliant efforts, and really she took England actually in that final, she made it not a total walkover. And if she just had somebody else who stayed with her a little bit longer, who knows? The Australians watching this will be laughing and saying, "No, you're talking absolute nonsense." But it's been a great year for her. Yeah. She then had that amazing innings in the Test against South Africa at Taunton. 169, I think it was. Finished in, I think it's the fourth or fifth highest score ever by an English woman in a Test, and the only reason that it wasn't the highest is because Heather Knight decided to declare the innings. That happens in Test cricket, obviously. That was a great performance, and then a couple of half centuries against South Africa, and then chosen to captain England in the Commonwealth Games. It has been, and I did try and recognise this in the citation surrounding the award. I said something like, "It's been a difficult year at times. It's been a very busy year for women's cricket, and of late, obviously, she's withdrawn from those India matches, citing emotional fatigue." And who can blame her, because it really does feel like, if you look at the England matches that they've played over the last 12 months, she's been carrying so much weight on her shoulders. So very well deserved for this award. I suppose that it does beg the question in relation to the captaincy, kind of following on from a conversation that we had last week. We did actually have a comment come in via YouTube from Andrew Brown, which was in relation to the India series, and the fact that Amy Jones was chosen to be the captain, but Sophie Ecclestone was chosen to be the vice captain. And he says, "Do you think that England's development of Sophie Ecclestone in that role, to the vice captaincy role, is going to pay dividends, or was it an experiment that was forced on them by circumstances?"
Well, it was certainly forced on them by circumstances, wasn't it, Raf? But what did you make of Ecclestone as, in that role? What do you think that her future is? Do you think that she has a future there?
I think she could be a really good permanent vice captain. I wouldn't necessarily give her the captaincy, because I think that, people are always reluctant to give it to a bowler, aren't they? And she is, largely speaking, a bowler. So there's that factor. But I think she could be a really good permanent vice captain. And it was obvious during those matches against India that, as one of the senior players, given that Knight and Sciver weren't around and Brunt wasn't around, she was therefore one of the players with the most experience. It's amazing given how young she still is, but anyway, and she was actually, partly because she fields at mid-on or mid-off, she was going up to the bowler when they were in difficulties, when they'd just been smashed a bit, patting them on the shoulder and saying, "Look, try this. What do you think about this?" And actually kind of helping to calm people down. And I think that was really needed at times, and it was really nice to see her doing that. So from my perspective, I do think that England will have seen her in that role, and will have kind of gone, "Oh, okay, well, that could be something that she then carries on doing in future." What do you think, Sid?
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree with you, and I point to even more specifically to a couple of instances about why she's definitely a potential future vice captain, but perhaps not a future captain. Okay. So, as you said, that she was talking to the bowlers. There was one particular incident at Bristol, right at the end, where Izzy Wong was getting body slammed by Pooja Vastrika, and the ball was going to all ends of the earth, and Izzy Wong was just like, "I know, I'll just bowl it faster. I'll bowl it even shorter and faster this time." It's like bang, bang, bang. And then after 3 or 4 balls of this, Ecclestone went up to Izzy Wong and was obviously like, "Look, mate, we need to chill things out a bit. Try a couple of slower balls." Izzy Wong tried a couple of slower balls. They both went for singles, because at that point in the innings, you're going to go for some runs.
Yeah.
But they didn't go to the boundary like half the rest of the over had done. So that's the kind of contribution that she made in her role there. I think the other thing that kind of the other side of things is the incident at Canterbury, where between Sophie Ecclestone and Amy Jones, they lost count of the amount of overs, or they miscalculated the amount of overs that Sophie Ecclestone had to bowl. It was really clear on television, and the commentator at the time, which I think was Charles Dagnall, talked through what was happening. But basically what was happening, to fill anybody in, was that they had like 3 overs left, and they had to make sure that they counted right, because they'd only used 5 bowlers. And the commentator was sitting there going, "Surely there's nothing to talk about here. You have to bowl this bowler from that end, because otherwise Ecclestone's going to run out of ends, and she's going to go an over short, and someone else is going to have to bowl the final over." And they obviously hadn't realised this. They then assigned somebody else to bowl that 48th over. And eventually, Tammy Beaumont, who had been biting her lip, fielding at cover or something, obviously came over and was like, "Guys, you've messed this up," and they were like, "Oh, have we?" So I think that kind of shows that it's not perhaps the actual captaincy. If you're losing count of your own overs, which effectively Eccleston had done there, then that does raise question marks about whether you're probably the right person to be captaining.
I think you're being a bit harsh, to be honest. I think Eccleston wasn't given the captaincy role, and she was actually having to. In that instance, it was Amy Jones who was responsible for that. It wasn't Eccleston's. Responsibility to have to keep count of the overs.
But keeping count of our own overs, Raf, I think there's
Yeah, but the real problem in that series was the confusion and the fact that it was like lots and lots of captains. But the one who was actually the captain, who was meant to have ultimate authority, was getting things in a muddle, and so everyone else was getting a bit muddled, I would say. So okay. I think maybe you're being a bit harsh there. Okay. I just think maybe there are some other candidates out there, and I know what you're about to say, so I'm going to come in first. I still don't understand what people have got against the possibility of Tammy Beaumont being captain.
Okay.
I don't understand why she wasn't made captain, at least for the ODIs against India. I probably would have wanged her in for the T20s as well, because then you've got continuity. And the incident that you've just described, she wasn't even meant to be doing the captaincy or the vice-captaincy, and she still knew the amount of overs everybody still had to bowl. Like that's a leader. She's also, we know that she was, at one point she was being selected to captain the academy, basically purely on the basis because they were like, well, we need somebody who's a good captain, so we're going to get her to do it. So I just find that a bit baffling. But I know that you've got thoughts on who is England's next captain after Heather Knight, Sid?
Well, honestly, the next couple of years, England's next captain after Heather Knight is Heather Knight. I think that England have just got to be desperately hoping now that Heather Knight's, the surgery that she's had, which, she explicitly told us was intended to prolong her career for another couple of years. England have got to really hope that she does, because I'm not really sure what the options are above and beyond that. And that 2 years gives them the time to bring Grace Scrivens into the team next summer, bring her into the team next summer, and then make her captain when Heather Knight retires a year afterwards.
So that's your answer, Grace Scrivens.
Yep. I think that Grace Scrivens is going to be a brilliant England captain. We've seen her captain, only at county level, but it was just remarkable how much authority she had on the pitch. She grew a foot taller when you put the captain's armband on her. She's a really, really smart person. She's aced all her school exams. She's got, a brain the size of a planet. She's going to be a fantastic England captain.
Yeah,
and she'll be able to come in
but
and
not
do
in
it.
2 years.
She will. She'll be good enough. You
You can't make somebody captain who's been in the team for less than 12 months, surely.
can.
Okay.
And you should.
I think you're a bit mad again, Sid. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be seriously looking at Scrivens to be bringing her into England, and I'm not saying that she won't one day be an excellent England captain, but I think, lovely, that you might be getting a little bit ahead of yourself. Okay. Just slightly, just marginally. Anyway, shall we move on to our final topic of the day? And finally, congratulations to Anna Harris. We've just mentioned the PCA Awards. I believe that she has been given the honour of being the Women's Umpire of the Year. And let's be honest, it's not a surprise, is it? How many other contenders can there have been? Because Anna Harris is just a brilliant umpire.
Yeah, no, and it's just fantastic. I think that the real moral of the story about Anna Harris is this. So, we've known Anna Harris quite a long time. She turned up at Berkshire about 7 or 8 years ago. She'd already spent some time. I think she was at Bucks originally, then went to Sussex, then came to Berkshire, then went back to Bucks. She obviously really wanted, to be part of cricket. She was a cricket nut, and she wanted to be a player. But it was kind of obvious when she turned up at Berkshire that she was a much better player than I ever was, but she was never going to be good enough to make it even as what we would now term a regional player, let alone an international player. And eventually, basically, she realised this. So what she's done is she's gone, well, I still want to be part of this. I still want to find a place for myself in this game, so I'm going to be an umpire, and I'm going to be the blooming best umpire in the world. And she's like 23 years old, and she's already like the best umpire in the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's amazing, isn't it?
So what it shows, I think, is that you have to find your place in this game. And we were talking to Melissa Story as well at the Cricket Writers Club lunch, who's another person that played a reasonably high level in her teens and things, but also found when she hit 19, 20 that she kind of realised she was saying that she wasn't going to make it as a top level player, and she also went out and found another way to contribute to the game and to be part of things, and has become a brilliant commentator. So there's a place for you in this game. Whoever you are, even if you're a washed up 40-something writer,
40-something.
looking at nobody in particular.
40-something.
I was 40-something when I started on this raid.
Yes.
There's a place for you in this game, so go out and find it.
Okay.
And on that bombshell,
let's wrap things up there. Thank you very much, Sid. Thanks to you all for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed it. See you next week.
Bye.